Teenage years are supposed to be about making good friends and making the right decisions. However, sometimes, some people make the wrong decisions and end up facing jail time. In this video, we will explore some of the most shocking and disturbing cases of teenage killers who were sentenced to life in prison and how they reacted to their verdicts. Kyle Williams. Learning that the jury saved his life, Kyle Williams showed no sign of relief or remorse. His siblings, on the other hand, had smiles of relief on their faces. Kyle Williams was convicted of first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer. At the age of 19, Williams was convicted of shooting Crispin in the head at a park on Crystal Grove Lane. Crispin, who was 25, was shot while attempting to conduct a pat-down search on Williams and 4 other young men in the park. Throughout the 3-week trial, members of both the Williams and Crispin families attended every day, as did members of the Lakeland Police Department. Despite the state's pursuit of the death penalty, the jury, consisting of 5 men and 7 women, reached a decision after 4 hours of deliberation. They recommended a sentence of life in prison. Throughout the trial proceedings, 4 young men took the witness stand, each providing compelling testimony that corroborated the prosecution's case. Their accounts left little doubt that it was Williams who had fired the fatal shot, further solidifying the case against him. Undoubtedly, the defense mounted a vigorous effort to poke holes in the prosecution's case. They meticulously sought to discredit the credibility of the witnesses, questioning the reliability of their statements and the veracity of their recollections. Additionally, the defense team meticulously examined the forensic evidence that tied Williams to the firearm used in the tragic shooting, challenging its chain of custody and potential contamination. One crucial aspect that defense lawyer Byron Heilman emphasized throughout the trial was Williams's age at the time of the incident. He argued that the impulsive and immature nature of adolescence should be considered when evaluating his actions on that fateful night. This approach aimed to underscore the complexity of the case, acknowledging that individuals may undergo significant changes in behavior and decision-making as they transition from adolescence to adulthood. In a bid to humanize Williams and provide the jury with a more well-rounded perspective of his character, several of his close friends and family members took the stand. They passionately conveyed that beyond the unfortunate events of that night, Williams was known for his jovial and goofy demeanor. Their testimonies sought to shed light on his positive qualities and establish a broader context for understanding his actions, adding depth to the narrative presented during the trial. Following the jury's recommendation, Circuit Judge Donald Jacobson declared Williams guilty of first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer and subsequently sentenced him to life in prison. "No, we're not happy with the verdict, because I believe that anybody who has no regard for life, especially for law enforcement officers, deserves a punishment of the death penalty," said Frankie Crispin, the officer's brother. Antonio Barbu and his friend Nathan Pape were both found guilty of killing Antonio's 78-year-old grandmother with a hatchet and hammer. During sentencing, Barbu showed a great deal of remorse. He tried to read a statement of apology to the court, but he became so overwhelmed that he couldn't finish. He then handed the letter to his defense attorney, George Limbeck, who was barely able to finish reading it. The 2 teenagers, driven by greed, hatched an evil plan to kill and steal from the old woman. Barbu had escaped from a juvenile detention facility when he crossed paths with Pape, and together they ended up at Barbu's grandmother's house. Once inside, Olson, the grandmother, kindly welcomed them. Unfortunately, it was then that they launched a brutal attack on her using a hatchet and a hammer. The coroner's examination revealed that Olson had endured a staggering 27 strikes from the 2 boys. After this horrific act, Barbu and Pape proceeded to steal money and jewelry from Olson's residence. They also took her car, abandoning it at a nearby bowling alley, possibly as a diversion from the original crime scene. Barbu's family and his defense attorney argue that he suffers from a permanent brain injury that impaired his judgment, and as a result, he should not face such a lengthy prison sentence. The defense attorney said, "Justice involves looking at a crime from all different perspectives. Otherwise, justice has a real risk of looking like nothing more than punishment and revenge." However, Judge Van Akkeren ultimately sentenced them both to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole for Barbu when he reaches the age of 50. "In my 24 years on the bench, I've not seen anything of this nature, not even close," Judge Timothy Van Akkeren told the court. "It gives me great sadness to see someone of your age going into the system. I'm sorry to see this have to happen." Jennifer Mee. That's Jennifer Mee breaking down in tears after she heard her sentence. But before we talk about her sentence, let's take a step back and discuss how she ended up in court. In 2007, when Mee was just 15 years old, she became famous worldwide due to her uncontrollable hiccups. Many U.S. TV shows invited her on board, and she accepted these invitations in search of a cure and claimed to be hiccuping 50 times per minute. Media outlets competed to have her on their morning shows, and they'd compare her world record hiccuping to the world record for sneezing. The causes and treatment of her condition condition were debated, but she remained a popular internet search topic until Dr. Bob Lynn successfully treated her. After being cured, Mee's media attention faded and she fell into bad habits. In 2010, she met a 22-year-old man online and invited him to an empty house, where two of her friends robbed and fatally shot him. After stealing less than $1.50 from him, Mee was charged with murder as an accomplice. She led the victim, Shannon Griffin, to the back of the vacant house where her friends, Lauren Rayford and Lamont Newton, were waiting with a .38 caliber handgun. The victim was shot 4 times, and the police initially didn't know which suspect had pulled the trigger. Mee, Rayford, and Newton lived together and were arrested shortly after the crime. Sergeant Skinner from the St. Petersburg Police Department stated that all of them admitted to their roles in the crime. Mee tearfully made a confession to the police while she was in custody.
When I walked off, I was to the corner. I heard the first gun. After the first gun, I ran.
Before the trial began, Jennifer Mee's defense attorney, John Trevena, approached the prosecution with a plea deal. He proposed that Mee would plead guilty in exchange for a 15-year prison sentence. It was a strategic move to potentially reduce her sentence by avoiding a lengthy trial. Lauren Rayford, one of the co-defendants in the case, was also offered a plea deal, which would have resulted in a 40-year prison sentence if he pleaded guilty. Rayford chose to reject the offer, opting to take his chances with a trial. During the trial itself, the prosecution presented a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of a jailhouse phone call between Jennifer Mee and her mother. In the call, Mee can be heard saying, "I didn't kill nobody. I set everything up. It all went wrong, Mom. It expletive just went downhill after everything happened, Mom." Additionally, forensic experts testified that Jennifer Mee's DNA was found on the victim's shirt. This physical evidence seemed to link her directly to the crime scene. Mee's defense attorney, however, argued that his client suffered from schizophrenia, suggesting that her mental state might have played a role in her actions. This led to the judge ordering a psychological evaluation to determine whether May was competent to stand trial. Despite the evaluation, it was ultimately determined that she was mentally fit for the proceedings. Another interesting defense strategy employed by Mee's lawyer was the assertion that her chronic hiccups were a symptom of Tourette's syndrome. Ultimately, in 2013, Jennifer Mee was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Her co-defendants, Lauren Rayford and Lamont Newton, were also convicted of first-degree felony murder and received life sentences in prison. Till this day, she claimed that she didn't mean to kill anybody.
To this day, I still truly don't know and understand what took place for them to do what they did.
Brandon Spencer. Brandon Spencer was about to be sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Brandon pounded his forehead twice on the desk in court as the judge read the sentence for his conviction on 4 counts of attempted murder. Sheriff's deputies gathered around Spencer as he sobbed following the emotional court appearance.
"I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I need some life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to betray me at."
On the evening of November 1st, 2012, Spencer found himself at a Halloween party hosted at the USC Tudor Campus Center. What was intended to be a night of festive celebration took a dark turn as events spiraled out of control. In a matter of moments, the atmosphere shifted and chaos ensued, resulting in a tragic incident where 4 people were shot. The gravity of the situation prompted the university to take immediate action. USC authorities issued an urgent alert to notify both students and staff that law enforcement agencies were actively investigating the incident. As a precautionary measure, they made the decision to temporarily shut down the campus, emphasizing the importance of everyone staying away from the affected area until further notice. Spencer and the 4 people who were shot while present at the party were not USC students. Spencer had aspirations of attending college in Arizona. At the time, he was a security guard in Los Angeles. Spencer also had a network of individuals who were more than willing to vouch for his character. He vehemently denied any involvement in the shooting and made a solemn promise to prove his innocence and secure his release from prison. Yet despite the absence of concrete evidence linking him to the crime and a defense team ready to fight for his cause, Spencer's legal battle was far from straightforward. An overzealous prosecutor, driven by the pressure to resolve the case quickly, pursued the conviction relentlessly. In a shocking twist, the prosecution relied on the coerced testimony of a defendant from an entirely unrelated case. This testimony pointed the finger squarely at Spencer, even in the absence of hard evidence. The case was incredibly quick and lasted only 3 hours. The verdict was delivered late on a Friday afternoon. Spencer was found guilty, leaving many questions unanswered and casting doubt on the integrity of the entire legal process. He was sentenced to spend the next 40 years in prison. Under SB 1437, the court has several options for providing relief. This can involve either overturning the conviction or revisiting the sentencing. Spencer is hopeful that his conviction will be overturned, leading to his release from prison. Additionally, SB 775 is relevant to this case. Also, the witness's retracted testimony against Spencer is highly significant. In a declaration that will be presented during Spencer's upcoming court appearance and has also been provided to Inglewood today, the statements include, "Because of me, Brandon Spencer received a sentence that was 40 years to life for a crime he didn't do. Because of me, the district attorney convicted a man who did not do what they say he did. For my part in that conviction, I'm sorry, but I must now set the record straight. I did not see Mr. Spencer leave the party and come back later with a gun. I did not see Mr. Spencer shoot a gun into the crowd or at Mr. Hall. I only said that I saw Mr. Spencer come back with the gun because the DA prosecuting the case told me that she needed me to say those things, or else she could not make her case for premeditation. I did what the DA said because I was threatened by the detectives investigating the case and by the DA prosecuting the case that if I did not say what they needed me to say, that the DA would intervene in my own pending criminal case and cause me to be harmed or sentenced more severely. So, it looks like Spencer was wrongfully incarcerated, and sadly, he is still in prison today." Dylan Shoemaker.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. I really didn't.
That was Dylan Shoemaker walking into the courtroom after what was a truly atrocious crime. Dylan Shoemaker was a 16-year-old living in Springville, New York at the time of the murder. He shared a home with his mother and his girlfriend, Ashley Smith, who had 2 young sons. On March 19, 2013, in Springville, New York, Dylan was tasked with looking after Ashley Smith's 2 sons while she was at work in a restaurant. Tragically, by the end of the night, one of the boys was found dead, and Dylan Shoemaker was arrested for causing his death. It was later revealed that he had brutally beaten Austin, the older son, who was nearly 2 years old, and sadly, Austin did not survive. "I never wanted to hurt Austin. I never wanted Austin to die," said 17-year-old Dylan Shoemaker, who was apologizing tearfully to his 19-year-old girlfriend in a courtroom in Buffalo. The jury that found Dylan Shoemaker guilty of second-degree murder did not accept his apology. State Supreme Court Justice M. William Bowler shared this disbelief and sentenced Dylan Shoemaker to the maximum punishment of 25 years to life in prison. Judge Bowler pointed out that Shoemaker, who had recently turned 17, clearly knew right from wrong at the age of 16. He recognized that it was entirely wrong to repeatedly strike Austin's head. During the trial, Dylan Shoemaker admitted to hitting Austin, who was almost 2 years old, because the child was crying and disturbing his baby brother. He claimed that he had placed a pillow on Austin's head and punched it in an attempt to stop the crying. The judge described the trial's testimony as heartbreaking. Witnesses recounted the brutal attack and the severe head injuries that ultimately resulted in Austin's brain bleeding and tragic death. The judge had serious doubts about Dylan Shoemaker's claim that he didn't intend to kill Austin or understand the consequences of his actions. Judge Bowler went so far as to label Shoemaker as a manipulator and deceiver. The judge referred to a phone conversation Shoemaker had with his mother while awaiting trial, where Shoemaker mentioned that he would use his age and appearance as a white man to gain sympathy from the jury. The judge also brought up the numerous texts Shoemaker sent while babysitting, where he tried to engage in sexual activities and sell drugs. This behavior was concerning and added to the judge's skepticism. Judge Bowler stressed that at the age of 17, Dylan Shoemaker had caused immense pain and grief to many people. He received letters from 13 individuals describing how the crime had affected them. Austin's grandfather, Michael Smith, told the judge that their family's life was destroyed because this tragedy didn't have to happen. He pleaded with the judge to consider their feelings in sentencing Dylan Shoemaker. Dylan Shoemaker's attorney agreed with the family's sentiments, arguing that if Ashley and her children hadn't been evicted from their home, they wouldn't have ended up at Dylan's house. He suggested that Dylan was ill-equipped to care for the children due to his challenging upbringing and anger issues. The judge questioned the defense attorney about the safety of the community if Dylan Shoemaker were to be released after serving 15 years. On the other hand, the prosecution maintained that blaming anyone other than Dylan for the tragedy was unrealistic. They argued that what Shoemaker did to Austin was not something a typical 16-year-old would do, regardless of his lack of experience as a babysitter. In an emotional moment, Dylan Shoemaker turned to his girlfriend, Ashley Smith, and tearfully apologized, expressing his love for Austin and deep regrets for what had transpired. He acknowledged his troubled family life, but also thanked his family for their support. Aiden Fucci. Aiden Fucci was sentenced to life for the murder of Tristan Bailey, and when he heard his judgment, he wore a straight and emotionless face. Fucci was 14 at the time of the crime, and he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He admitted to the brutal stabbing of Tristan Bailey more than 100 times in the woods at the end of a cul-de-sac in the quiet Durbin Crossing neighborhood. During his announcement of the decision in St. Johns County Court, Judge Smith provided a comprehensive explanation for his ruling. In his closing remarks, just before delivering the sentence, Judge Smith highlighted a particularly troubling aspect of the case, and it was the fact that Fucci's action had no motive. This was not done out of greed. It was not done in retaliation or retribution or revenge. It was not a crime of passion. It was not a crime that was committed because he felt rejected by her. It was not done in a fit of uncontrollable anger. There was no reason. There was no purpose. It was done for no other reason than to satisfy this defendant's internal desire to feel what it was like to kill someone, Smith said. This leads this court to the conclusion that there is only one appropriate sentence in this case. The judge also recounted horrific details of this horrifying death, including her 49 defensive wounds, which meant she was aware, and she tried to do everything she could to fend off this attack. During the sentencing hearing, the judge described this case as the most challenging and shocking he has encountered in his 30 years of living and working in Northeast Florida. The only family member who spoke on behalf of Aiden Fucci during the sentencing was his grandmother. She tearfully apologized to the Bailey family in the courtroom and pleaded with the judge not to sentence him to life, saying, "Please don't take him out of our lives forever. I know there is some good in Aiden." Judge Smith acknowledged the grandmother's bravery in testifying on Fucci's behalf, recognizing that it was a difficult decision for her. After the sentencing, Forrest Bailey, Tristan's father, also expressed gratitude for the grandmother's apology, acknowledging the pain that both families were experiencing. "Your apology on the stand really touched us," he said. "It was the first time anyone in your family had acknowledged it, and we feel for you, as we can tell how much you are hurting." Fucci's mother, Crystal Smith, did not appear in court, but sent a letter to Judge Smith, requesting mercy and stating that he is not beyond saving. Fucci also wrote a letter to the court saying, "I'm sorry for all the pain I caused to the Bailey family. I'm sorry to the friends, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, and any other family relatives. I'm sorry that you didn't get to know her that long. You did not have any long relationships with Tristan, and for that I'm sorry." Danta Wright. Danta Wright was seen smiling and laughing while he was being sentenced for the murder of an Ann Arbor high school student. Wright entered a guilty plea for the fatal shooting of Jordan Klee. However, before his sentencing, he had to face Klee's family in court. When given the opportunity to speak, instead of expressing remorse, Wright taunted the victim's family. "I just wanted to tell y'all I'll be home soon," Wright said. "I'll be all right, I love my family." Disturbingly, he was also observed smiling and laughing while the family read their victim impact statement. The judge was appalled and said, "You know, I have never in all my 23 years of prosecuting not accepted a sentence agreement that is bargained for, sentenced by the parties," Washtenaw County Judge David Swartz said. "But watching you sit there and smile and laugh and shake your head like this is no big deal, I'm very tempted to just say I'm not going to accept this agreement. You'll go to trial." The prosecutor argued that Wright was a member of a gang and had incorporated his criminal lifestyle into his music. Wright's lawyer, on the other hand, presented a different perspective, stating, "Your Honor, very briefly, it's a rap. Raps don't necessarily reflect reality." In the end, Wright was sentenced to 23 to 50 years for second-degree murder. It's worth noting that the family of Klee opted not to endure the pain of a trial, which led to the guilty plea and subsequent sentencing. Philip Chisholm. This next story was truly inspired by pure evil, and it is one of the most disturbing teen murder stories in recent history. Chisholm was reportedly antisocial and really tired and out of it. It was also reported that his mother was going through a difficult divorce at the time of the crime. On October 22, 2013, he carried out a brutal act against his 24-year-old maths teacher, Colleen Ritzer. Colleen Ritzer was known for her cheerful demeanor and her willingness to assist students with their maths problems. On that ill-fated day in October, she had asked Chisholm to stay after school, unaware of the sinister plans he had hatched days earlier. The problem started when Ritzer mentioned Chisholm's recent move from Tennessee, which reportedly upset him, as noted by Boston Magazine. Ritzer changed the subject, but a student who witnessed the interaction later saw Chisholm seemingly talking to himself. Hours later, the horrifying incident unfolded. The school's newly installed security cameras captured footage of 14-year-old Chisholm arriving at school with several bags, which he placed in his locker. These bags contained a box cutter, mask, gloves, and a change of clothing. According to the New York Times, security footage revealed Ritzer leaving her classroom and heading towards the second-floor women's bathroom at approximately 2:54 p.m. Chisholm can be seen in the hallway, briefly looking in her direction before concealing his identity with a hood. He followed Ritzer into the bathroom, putting on gloves as he entered. Chisholm proceeded to rob Ritzer of her credit cards, iPhone, and her underwear, before raping and stabbing her 16 times in the neck with the box cutter. Chisholm strategically changed his clothing during the course of the crime, a calculated move that law enforcement later pointed to as evidence of premeditation. At 3:07 p.m., Chisholm exited the bathroom with his head concealed by a hood and proceeded outside to the parking lot. When he returned just 2 minutes later, he had switched into a fresh white t-shirt. Next, Chisholm re-entered the classroom, this time donning a different red hooded sweatshirt, before making another trip to the bathroom at 3:16 p.m. This time, he brought along a recycling bin. Emerging once more, he was in the white t-shirt and a black mask, using the bin to transport Ritzer's body towards an elevator and ultimately out of the school. Security cameras captured Chisholm re-entering the school building, now wearing a black shirt, glasses, and carrying a pair of bloodied jeans, marking the chilling conclusion of his grim wardrobe transformation. He dragged the bin all the way to a wooded area behind the school, where he raped Ritzer's lifeless body again, but with a tree branch. At 3 a.m., police found Ritzer's half-naked body covered with leaves near a pair of stained white gloves. A branch had to be pulled from her private part, and a folded handwritten note lay nearby, worded, "I hate you all." Philip Chisholm faced indictment for the heinous crimes of murdering, committing aggravated rape, and carrying out an armed robbery against Colleen Ritzer. He was tried as an adult, and on February 26, 2016, he received a minimum prison sentence of 40 years. Throughout the proceedings, Chisholm displayed no signs of remorse for his actions. According to court documents, when Chisholm was asked whose blood it was, he said, "It's the girl's." When asked if he knew where she was, he chillingly replied, "She's buried in the woods." T.J. Lane. Before his sentence, T.J. Lane took off his shirt to reveal a white t-shirt with the word killer written on it. Thomas T.J. Michael Lane III was born on September 19, 1994, in Chardon, Ohio. As a teenager, he struggled with socialization issues at school, which went largely unnoticed by those around him. On February 27, 2012, at 7:30 a.m., Lane entered Chardon High School and opened fire on a group of students using a .22 caliber handgun. Tragically, he took the lives of 3 students, Demetrius Hewlin, Russell King Jr., and Daniel Parmator, while injuring 3 others. Joseph Ricci and Frank Hall, 2 teachers, were hailed as heroes for their courageous actions during the incident. Ricci swiftly secured his maths class during the shooting, pulled an injured student inside, and provided first aid. Witnesses recounted how Hall, an assistant football coach, bravely confronted Lane, who was still armed, and pursued him out of the school until the police captured him. Lane faced serious charges, including 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of attempted aggravated murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. He was tried as an adult and ultimately pled guilty to all charges. During his sentencing, Lane shocked the courtroom by displaying bizarre behavior for attention. He smiled and laughed while listening to the parents' testimonies of the victims and responded with cursing and obscene gestures, showing no remorse for his actions. Lane was convicted and received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He escaped the death penalty due to his age at the time of the murders, as he was only 17 years old. Martise Fuller. Martise Fuller maintained that he was innocent all through the court proceedings and was often seen visibly emotional. Fuller had been living with his girlfriend Kaylee Juga and her stepmother Stephanie Juga. The argument stemmed from Fuller's expulsion from school and his subsequent removal from the football team, a series of events that he vehemently blamed Kaylee for. And so, driven by anger and resentment, Fuller decided to take matters into his own hands. Under the cover of darkness, he snuck into the house through the garage door, setting the stage for a horrifying sequence of events. He shot Kaylee multiple times until she died. Stephanie Juga, Kaylee's mother, recounted that she was upstairs when she heard her daughter scream. In a 2019 interview, Stephanie described how she found herself standing next to Fuller, who was holding a gun, and desperately pleaded, "You don't have to do this." His chilling response was, "Yes, I have to." At the time of this horrifying incident, both Fuller and Kaylee were only 15 years old, and they were highly regarded students at Bradford High School. Stephanie also informed investigators that she attempted to close the door to protect herself, but was shot multiple times by Fuller. She then retreated to a bathroom where she managed to call 911 for help. According to Kenosha County District Attorney Michael Gravely, this case was a case of domestic violence. He said, "I cried openly when I read Nick Juga's letter, and I did that because this is a man who has spent his entire professional life protecting this country and protecting all of us as individuals." Martise Fuller wrote a statement which was read by an attorney in court. He apologized, but didn't give any explanation, and said he maintains his innocence. "But I have to continue to stand innocent because I am," the attorney read out loud for Fuller. "And I know that I've barely showed emotion throughout my time, but in all honesty, it is because it's hard to have tears left to cry knowing my mom lost a son, one of her children too." He pleaded not guilty to the charges, however. A jury found him guilty in March of 2021. Fuller's attorney asked the court for the possibility of extended supervision in 25 to 30 years. However, the judge granted the state's request and sentenced Fuller to life in prison without a chance at parole. The judge also said, "The court has no trust whatsoever that what brought you to this murder and attempted murder is repaired or repairable ever." He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance for release. Sierra Halseth. This particular case was atrocious to say the least, as Sierra Halseth and her boyfriend Guerrero colluded to kill her own father. While listening to her sentence, Sierra didn't look bothered at all, and she didn't shed a single tear. So what exactly led to this run of events? Sierra's parents went through a highly contentious divorce, as revealed in court records. Elizabeth Helgalian, Sierra's mother, had been granted primary custody after a divorce filing by Halseth in 2011. However, custody arrangements became a point of contention between the parents in 2020. Sierra made disturbing allegations against her father, accusing him of both sexual and physical abuse, as well as pressuring her to consume alcohol. This claim gained credibility, as Child Protective Services had interviewed Sierra at some point, as per court records. During family court hearings, Judge Charles Hoskin expressed concerns, stating, "Something else is going on with Sierra." In 2011, Sierra's father, Daniel Halseth, faced legal trouble, with an indictment on 2 felony counts, coercion and battery, along with a misdemeanor count of open and gross lewdness. In a negotiated agreement with prosecutors, he pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor charges. Consequently, he received a sentence on October 15th, handed down by Judge Jennifer Togliatti, which included 6 months of probation, mandatory anger management classes, a directive to maintain a clean record, and strict orders to have no contact with the victim. Additionally, he was required to pay $975 or complete 97 hours of community service. Court records indicate that Sierra and Guerrero were in a relationship from June 2020 to December 2020. Their parents intervened and prevented them from seeing each other after discovering that the teenagers planned to leave for Los Angeles together. Shortly before Halseth's body was discovered, Guerrero ran away from home. The teenagers were found to have purchased a circular saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, disposable gloves, and a drop cloth from stores near Halseth's residence. Additionally, a significant sum of money was withdrawn from one of Halseth's bank accounts. The couple stabbed Sierra's father more than 70 times and attempted to set his house on fire. They also took his car and debit card to flee to Salt Lake City. Following their arrest, investigators discovered a video on Sierra's phone in which the couple appeared to be laughing and discussing what officials believed to be her father's murder. District Judge Tiara Jones sentenced Sierra and Guerrero to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. The defendants also were ordered to pay $5,000 in restitution. Her mother, Helgalian, told the Review-Journal that she believed what her daughter said about her ex-husband and that she wanted Sierra removed from his home. She said, "The system failed her at every turn. They could have saved her and they failed her."